Hi everyone, this is Paul here for the Magdalene Centre. Today I'm doing the astrology report for the Sun's transit through Scorpio, beginning on the 23rd of October and finishing on the 22nd of November. Now, I'll be outlining some of the key themes that this month highlights to us, along with some of the key transits or aspects that the Sun's going to make to the various planets in the sky. But before I do that though, I just want to clarify, as I always do, that astrology doesn't control our lives. It merely helps us to understand what kind of lessons are available to us to learn, what's the energy around us doing, and which kind of direction do we need to move in order to achieve maximum growth for where we are at this time of the year. But at the end of the day, it's up to each and every one of us to take the necessary actions to work up with the lessons. It's up to us to actually listen to what the messages are from the skies, if you like, and to seek to apply them in our lives in a way that empowers ourselves and helps other people in the process. But the astrology in and of itself won't make anything happen. We actually have to participate in the process for things to unfold in the right kind of way. Now, for the month of Scorpio, this is a time for transformation. It's a time of letting go. We can see Scorpio in action here in the Northern Hemisphere through what the trees are doing in autumn. You look at the deciduous trees, what they're essentially doing is, because there's no more growth for them to be achieving at this time, it now takes more energy to hold on to leaves than it does to keep them, to let them go. So what the trees do, they withdraw the energy from the leaves because the leaves are now a drain to their energy rather than creating it. And as the trees withdraw their life force and take it down into their roots, the leaves, which represent the old growth, now die off, and what's left behind is the actual growth that the tree has achieved in terms of new branches. And this is what we need to go through psychologically as well. It's a time of dying to the old in order to be reborn anew. It's a time for us to observe very carefully and analyse what no longer serves a purpose, what represents an old structure in life, an old way of being that is no longer in resonance with who we are, and to hold on to it requires more personal energy than it's worth. Because in some cases we end up clinging to something out of familiarity, and we only let go of it when the cost of holding on becomes greater than the cost of letting go of it. And part of this season is learning the wisdom of letting go right from the start, if that is what is required. Is recognizing and being honest with ourselves what is actually what's working in our lives and still belongs, what no longer belongs and needs to be let go of to make space for new beginnings to come in. And it's with Scorpio, it's exploring the deep unconscious. This is more than just, these are things that we can't necessarily reason with. Scorpio deals with raw feelings and those primal instincts, but it also deals with what's buried in the unconscious. The sun in Scorpio symbolically shines a light deep into the unconscious, so this is a time of year where if we have unresolved issues, we may get triggered by events outside of ourselves, but the events aren't there to hurt us, they're there to help show us where we have old unresolved issues. We've got buttons within the psyche that people can still press because we haven't deactivated them through healing ourselves. So this is a time of year where we can achieve a very deep level of healing if we're prepared to be honest with ourselves, if we're prepared to observe where old obsessive thought patterns, old emotional complexes quite often from childhood, are now inappropriate responses to events in our lives, where events which are completely unrelated to the original wound have enough of a mirror of the original event that our mind makes a connection and then triggers the same emotional pattern that we did in the past, but now it's no longer applicable. It's actually becoming destructive when it may have been a necessary coping mechanism in the past. Now it's no longer helping us. So it's looking to shine that light into the unconscious, to make the unconscious conscious, if you will, and to see where do we have emotional patterns tied over from the past that need to let go of. And one of the key choices to make during this time, or key lessons, is about forgiveness. It's recognising that forgiveness isn't about condoning the other party, it's about understanding that it's releasing ourselves. It's letting go of the old wound, letting go of the old hurts, and recognising that through healing ourselves and letting go of the need for someone else to apologise first, we become healed and whole, and we're no longer expending energy keeping old hurts alive. Because events happened years ago, but the mind itself doesn't necessarily distinguish from that. If we remember something, remember it as though it's just happened. But if we can learn to have the courage to forgive old events, it could be forgiving other people, and in many cases it may actually be forgiving ourselves because we went against our own best interests. We may have known it wasn't right for us, but we felt like we still went along potentially out of fear of rejection. And again, rejection is another core area of Scorpio sometimes has to deal with. So it's learning to love oneself entirely. It's about connecting with the core of our being, and it's shedding the layers of illusion, shedding the outer layers of the ego, and allowing the ego to be transformed through acknowledging the truth of who we are, taking ownership of our lives, and taking charge of our internal responses to things. Because it's difficult to control external events, and this is another thing that Scorpio often struggles with. It's that need to control in order to feel secure. But if we can overcome this tendency, because control is ultimately illusion, and instead the only thing we seek to control is our internal response to outer events, then external events no longer have any power over us. We empower ourselves through breaking any connections or any attachments to old events. Through forgiveness, we deactivate old triggers, and we enable ourselves to be in the world but not of it. We're no longer attached to the old. We're no longer triggered by old events because we've healed it, we've let them go, and now if something similar happens to the past, it no longer has any power over us, because we can choose to rise above it and not respond or react to situations. So instead of reacting, we take a step back, we breathe, and then we consciously respond to it, so asserting ourselves where need be, and having the wisdom to know when to respond and when to just walk away and ignore the other person if that's what is required. Now, in terms of the aspects to the Sun, most of the aspects to the month of Scorpio are going to be sextiles or trines planets, because of the concentration of planets in either Earth or water. So as a result, most of the aspects are going to be harmonious. However, we do go off with, the month just start off with a bit of a bang with a major full moon in Taurus, and this is on the 24th. This is on the same day that the Sun opposes Uranus, and this marks the midpoint of the Uranus retrograde. So it's a time where we may suddenly get a lot of revelations or a major dose of truth, and from here we then have to decide, are we going to turn a corner in our lives? Are we going to change direction? We're going to try and stick with the old, even though deep down we know it's not right for us, but as a result we shackle our growth. On that same day, we're going to have the Sun and Uranus are square to the nodal axis, so we have a grand cross. So that particular full moon will be like a crossroads for us all to choose. Do we stick with the South Node in Aquarius, where we cling to group identity, we cling to group think, we're always waiting to receive more knowledge before we take any action? Or do we move towards Leo and have the courage to start new projects, embrace our own creative gifts, learn to become the best versions of ourselves? Because for the health of the whole to improve, the health of the individual parts has to be boosted. So by working on ourselves, by becoming the best versions of ourselves we can be, the people around us naturally benefit. So rather than going with the crowd or going with the flow of the crowd, it's learning to know oneself, have the courage to pursue the dreams that we hold within ourselves, and it's embrace those warm emotional feelings again. It's reconnecting with the child within. It doesn't mean that we become childish or irresponsible. It means we connect with those warm feelings, that emotional warmth, that connection, that desire for self-expression, desire for creativity that's unfettered. And if we do that, we become the best versions of ourselves. We can shine our own personal light better, and this then allows a collective light of people coming together to be much brighter than if we're relying on the group to fulfill our needs, but we don't participate within that group or help it out. Now the next aspect along is going to be the Sun conjunct Venus retrograde on the 26th. Venus has been retrograde since the 5th of October. This conjunction between Venus and the Sun represents the beginning of a new Venus cycle. So this is a time for where new seeds are being sown, and in the weeks after we may start seeing new beginnings forming from those seeds. But this retrograde is all about the relationship with ourselves and the relationship with others. But if the relationship with the self isn't healthy, how can we expect to have healthy relationships with others? And it's also about recognising where the relationships we currently have with people either need to be transformed, or in some cases need to be let go of altogether, because the person symbolises an old stage of life and that person's not changing themselves, so hanging around would end up being toxic. So it's having the courage to separate from the people that no longer serve our growth, and it's spending time with the self, learning to love oneself unconditionally and to know oneself, because only through knowing and loving oneself unconditionally that we can then give that same gift to another person. But after this particular conjunction, one thing we need to be mindful of during the rest of the month of Scorpio, because the Venus retrograde will end partway through, is we need to be mindful that we don't allow ourselves to be pulled off tangent. We don't allow a relationship that seems ideal to suddenly come in, because this isn't a time for new relationships yet. It's important to wait after the retrograde, because we still need to work on ourselves. We need to make sure that we honour ourselves throughout the process. We learn to shine our light better through the releasing of the old ego and allowing the light of spirit to flood through us, and then learn to stabilise and embody this process throughout the rest of the retrograde. So by the time we emerge, we've gone through that transformation, we're filled with love and the power of spirit, and then we can start allowing new relationships to form, because the key stage where the seed is starting to mature and grow has been successfully navigated, and now we can start looking for new relationships, as it were. Later in the same week, on the 28th, Saturn will be sextile the Sun. So this being around close to the retrograde, this brings in that necessary ingredient of self-discipline, self-control, patience and perseverance. And with it being a sextile, it gives us an opportunity to more readily incorporate these aspects or these elements or characteristics into our psyche or into our character. But as per usual with sextiles, we have to consciously work with it. It won't just happen for us. We do have to do the necessary work of working with the energies and seeking to consciously take any opportunity to develop more discipline and more self-control. On the next one will be Neptune on the 6th. This is a trine to Neptune retrograde. This gives an opportunity to let go of the past more, to embrace the power of unconditional love and compassion more readily, and we may find that our psychic sensitivity gets a bit of a tune-up if we work consciously with it. With it being a trine though, we also need to be mindful that we don't just let it go by, because we can end up being complacent. We also need to make sure we're operating from a higher level of awareness to make sure the trine's manifesting smoothly. A day later, we have the new moon in Scorpio, so this gives us an opportunity to set new intentions in this area. To do another video on that at a later date. And this obviously gives us an opportunity to raise the level that we operate within the energies of Scorpio, so letting go of the past, dealing with self-mastery, and looking at how we can develop greater self-control and releasing the past and embracing forgiveness. And it's looking at how can we learn to share more readily rather than trying to control things or hoard things. On the 11th, Sun sextile Pluto, so again another opportunity to go through deep transformation, with Pluto being the ruler of Scorpio. So the more we embrace Pluto here, and allow the power of truth to transform ourselves through letting go of old comfortable illusions and embracing truth, the better we will be. And then lastly, we have the sun. We have the sextile also to Vesta 2 days later. So this brings us an opportunity to develop more devotion or more commitment to being true to oneself. Before later date, around the 20th, the sun will trine Chiron, and this gives us an opportunity to become conscious of old wounds of disconnection, conscious of any addictive tendencies we have, any tendencies for escapism, and to consciously let go of them. So there's a lot to take on board there. The main thing to remember this month of Scorpio is this is a time of going within, of facing the truth of who we are, and transforming the psyche at a deep level through forgiveness, through learning to love ourselves unconditionally, through accepting the shadow and doing the shadow work. And if we take a look at how the trees model this for us, this shows it's time for withdrawing energy from the old to allow it to drop away, and this then creates space in our lives for new beginnings at a later date to form. This is a time for going down into the roots of our psyches and exploring the deepest depths and transforming it. And the more we do this, the more we empower ourselves, the more we let go of old conditioning, and the more empowered our relationships with others become, because we become healed and empowered, and that then allows us to share these gifts with other people. So I hope that's a useful guide for the sun's transit through Scorpio. I appreciate it's a long video and there's a lot of information there, but if you remember nothing else, this is a month of transformation. It's a time for letting go of the old, and it's a time for empowering ourselves through embracing forgiveness, facing our own shadow and transforming it through acceptance, and then seeking to consciously work with other people in empowered dynamics, and making sure that everything we do is motivated by love and compassion, and is done for the good of all and not just for personal gain. So may the sun's transit through Scorpio bring you many insights, much growth and much empowerment. Take care and may be blessed.